8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I can't afford it. I've only got a couple bucks. Marvin, your turn. Here you go. Oh, Marvin. You got a 2. And you got a 3, so that's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Marvin, I love that you love the T-Rex. I know that's your favorite animal, you silly goose. All right, Mr. Robert Plant, it's your turn. Oh, hello there. How are you today? I was just playing one of my favorite board games, Monopoly, with 2 of my good friends. This is Robert Plant. He's a new addition to our Hamilton Read series. And of course, you guys have all met Marvin before. Marvin's been here a time or 2 on this Hamilton Read series. So I was just playing Monopoly with my 2 friends, and to be honest with you, I'm not doing very well. I'm getting my butt kicked. I'm down to just a few dollars and a couple properties. Marvin's got a bunch of money, and honestly, I think Robert Plant is kicking our butts. He's got the most property. I don't know how he does it. I'm envious of him every time. It really grinds my gears, to be honest with you. But before we read our next chapter in our Charlie and the Chocolate Factory book, I wanted to start with our sock segment, and I'll show you a pair of socks that I'm wearing, in addition to a unique shirt that I have on. So my socks today are not necessarily very special. I actually have a lot of this kind of sock, but they're the most comfortable sock to me. I like wearing them. They're super, super comfy, and since I always do a sock segment, I figured I'd show it off. So since I'm pretty much over this game, and I'm sick of it, I'm just going to go ahead and flop up here. Those are my Nike socks. I like my Nike socks. There they are. Look at those nice socks. Aren't those nice socks, Marvin? Nice socks. So, those are my socks. And today I've got on a special shirt as well. It's actually $100 bill $100 bill shirt. It's just got a ton of $100 bills. And it's kind of funny because I like to make the joke that, oh, I'm made of money. But really, not so much at all. In fact, I probably have about as much money as this little pocket right there. Just that little pocket. Anyway, that's my... Were you trying to bite a fly? That was crazy. I've never seen you try to do that before. You've seen my socks? You saw my special shirt? Let's get to the book, shall we? Marvin, you want a treat? Robert Plant, you want a treat? You good? All right. I'm sure Marvin will eat yours. Here we go. Chapter 17 of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is called Augustus Gloop Goes Up the Pipe. When Mr. Wonka turned round and saw what Augustus Gloop was doing, he cried out, "Oh no! Please, Augustus, please! I beg of you not to do that. My chocolate must be untouched by human hands." "Augustus!" called out Mrs. Gloop. "Didn't you hear what the man said? Come away from that river at once." "Oh, this stuff is fabulous," said Augustus, taking not the slightest notice of his mother or Mr. Wonka. "Gosh, I need a bucket to drink it properly." "Augustus," cried Mr. Wonka, hopping up and down and waggling his stick in the air, "you must come away. You are dirtying my chocolate." "Augustus!" cried Mrs. Gloop. "Augustus!" cried Mr. Gloop. But Augustus was deaf to everything except the call of his enormous stomach. He was now lying full length on the ground with his head far out over the river, lapping up the chocolate like a dog. Like a dog? Like a dog! That's you! Like a dog. Yeah. "Augustus!" shouted Mrs. Gloop. "You'll be giving that nasty coat of yours to about 1 million people all over the country." "Oh, be careful, Augustus," shouted Mr. Gloop. "You're leaning too far out." Mr. Gloop was absolutely right. For suddenly there was a shriek, and then a splash, and into the river went Augustus Gloop, and in 1 second he had disappeared under the brown surface. "Oh, save him!" screamed Mrs. Gloop, going white in the face and waving her umbrella about. "He'll drown! He can't swim a yard! Save him! Save him!" "Good heavens, woman!" said Mr. Gloop. "I'm not diving in there. I've got my best suit on." Augustus Gloop's face came up again on the surface, painted brown with chocolate. "Help! Help! Help!" he yelled. "Fish me out! Don't just stand there," Mrs. Gloop screamed at Mr. Gloop. "Do something!" "I am doing something," said Mr. Gloop, who was now taking off his jacket and getting ready to dive into the chocolate. But while he was doing this, the wretched boy was being sucked closer and closer towards the mouth of one of the great pipes that was dangling down into the river. Then all at once, the powerful suction took hold of him completely, and he was pulled under the surface and then into the mouth of the pipe. The crowd on the riverbank waited breathlessly to see where he would come out. "There he goes!" somebody shouted, pointing upwards. And sure enough, because the pipe was made of glass, Augustus Gloop could be clearly seen shooting up inside it head first like a torpedo. "Help! Murder! Police!" screamed Mrs. Gloop. "Augustus, come back at once! Where are you going?" "Oh, it's a wonder to me," said Mr. Gloop, "how that pipe is big enough for him to go through it." "Well, it isn't big enough," said Charlie Bucket. "Oh dear, look, he's slowing down." "Well, so he is," said Grandpa Joe. "He's gonna stick," said Charlie. "Oh, I think he is," said Grandpa Joe. "By golly, he has stuck," said Charlie. "It's his stomach that's done it," said Mr. Gloop. "He's blocked the whole pipe," said Grandpa Joe. "Smash the pipe!" yelled Mrs. Gloop, still waving her umbrella. "Augustus, come out of there at once!" The watchers below could see the chocolate swishing around the boy in the pipe, and they could see it building up behind him in a solid mass, pushing against the blockage. The pressure was terrific. Something had to give, something did give, and that something was Augustus. Whoof! Up he shot again like a bullet in the barrel of a gun. "Oh, he's disappeared!" yelled Mrs. Gloop. "Where does the pipe go? Quick, call the fire brigade!" "Keep calm," cried Mr. Wonka. "Keep calm, my dear lady, keep calm. There's no danger whatsoever. Augustus has gone on a little journey, that's all. A most interesting little journey, but he'll come out of it just fine. You wait and see." "How can he possibly come out just fine?" snapped Mrs. Gloop. "He'll be made into marshmallows in 5 seconds." "Oh, impossible," cried Mr. Wonka. "Unthinkable, inconceivable, absurd. He could never be made into marshmallows." "And why not, may I ask?" shouted Mrs. Gloop. "Oh, because that pipe doesn't go anywhere near it. That pipe, the one Augustus went up, happens to lead directly to the room where I make a most delicious kind of strawberry-flavored chocolate-coated fudge." "Well, then he'll be made into strawberry-flavored chocolate-coated fudge!" screamed Mrs. Gloop. "My poor Augustus! That scared the crap out of me, man. I know that was a fly, but that scared the crap out of me. My poor Augustus! They'll be selling him by the pound all over the country tomorrow morning." "Oh, quite right," said Mr. Gloop. "I know I'm right," said Mrs. Gloop. "Oh, it's beyond a joke," said Mr. Gloop. "Mr. Wonka doesn't seem to think so," cried Mrs. Gloop. "Just look at him. He's laughing his head off. How dare you laugh like that when my boy's just gone up the pipe, you monster!" She shrieked, pointing her umbrella at Mr. Wonka as though she were going to run him through. "You think it's a joke, do you? You think that sucking my poor boy up into your fudge room like that is just one great big colossal joke? He'll be perfectly safe," said Mr. Wonka, giggling slightly. "He'll be chocolate forever!" shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "Oh, never!" cried Mr. Wonka. "Well, of course he will!" shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "I wouldn't allow it!" cried Mr. Wonka. "And why not?" shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "Because the taste would be terrible," said Mr. Wonka. "Just imagine it. Augustus-flavored chocolate-coated gloop. No one would allow it." "They most certainly would," cried Mr. Gloop indignantly. "I don't want to think about it," shrieked Mrs. Gloop. Well, nor do I, said Mr. Wonka, and I do promise you, madam, that your darling boy is perfectly safe. Well, if he's perfectly safe, then where is he? Snapped Mrs. Gloop. Lead me to him this instant. Mr. Wonka turned around and clicked his fingers sharply. Click, 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 3 times. Immediately an Oompa Loompa appeared as if it were from nowhere and stood beside him. The Oompa Loompa bowed and smiled, showing beautiful white teeth. His skin was rosy white, his long hair was golden brown, and the top of his head came just above the height of Mr. Wonka's knee. He wore the usual deerskin slung over his shoulder. Now listen to me, said Mr. Wonka, looking down at the tiny man. I want you to take Mr. and Mrs. Gloop up to the fudge room and help them to find their son, Augustus. He's just gone up the pipe. The Oompa Loompa took one look at Mrs. Gloop and exploded into peals of laughter. Oh, do be quiet, said Mr. Wonka. Control yourself, pull yourself together. Mrs. Gloop doesn't think it's all that funny. Oh, you can say that again, said Mrs. Gloop. Go straight to the fudge room, said Mr. Wonka to the Oompa Loompas, and when you get there, take a long stick and start poking around inside the big chocolate mixing barrel. I'm almost certain you'll find him in there. But you'd better look sharp. You'll have to hurry. If you leave him in the chocolate mixing barrel too long, he'll be liable to get poured out into the fudge boiler. And that really would be a disaster, wouldn't it? My fudge would become quite uneatable. Mrs. Gloop let out a shriek of fury. Oh, I'm joking, said Mr. Wonka, giggling madly behind his beard. I didn't mean it. Forgive me. I'm so sorry. Goodbye, Mrs. Gloop and Mr. Gloop. Goodbye. I'll see you later. As Mr. and Mrs. Gloop and their tiny escort hurried away, the 5 Oompa Loompas on the far side of the river suddenly began hopping and dancing about and beating wildly upon a number of very small drums. Augustus Gloop, they chanted. Augustus Gloop. Augustus Gloop, Augustus Gloop. Grandpa, cried Charlie. Listen to them, Grandpa. What are they doing? Shh, whispered Grandpa Joe. I think they're going to sing us a song. Augustus Gloop, chanted the Oompa Loompas. Augustus Gloop, Augustus Gloop, the great big greedy nincompoop. How long could we allow this beast to gorge and guzzle, feed and feast on everything he wanted to? Great Scott, it simply wouldn't do. However long this pig might live, we're positive he'd never give even the smallest bit of fun or happiness to anyone. So what we do in cases such as this, we use the gentle touch, and carefully we take the brat and turn him into something that will give great pleasure to us all. A doll, for instance, or a ball, or marbles, or a rocking horse. But this revolting boy, of course, was so unutterably vile, so greedy, foul, and infantile, we left a most disgusting taste inside our mouths, and so in haste we chose a thing that, come what may, would take the nasty taste away. Come on, we cried, the time is ripe to send him shooting up the pipe. He has to go, it has to be, and very soon he's going to see. Inside the room to which he's gone, some funny things are going on. But don't, dear children, be alarmed. Augustus Gloop will not be harmed. Although, of course, we must admit, he will be altered quite a bit. He'll be quite changed from what he's been when he goes through the fudge machine. Slowly the wheels will go round and round. The cogs begin to grind and pound. 100 knives go slice, slice, slice. We add some sugar, cream, and spice. We boil him for a minute more until we're absolutely sure that all the greed and all the gall is boiled away for once and all. Then out he comes, and now, by grace, a miracle has taken place. This boy who, only just before, was loathed by men from shore to shore. This greedy brute, this louse's ear, is loved by people everywhere. For who could hate or bear a grudge against a luscious bit of fudge? I told you they loved singing, said Mr. Wonka. Aren't they delightful? Aren't they charming? But you mustn't believe a word they said. It's all nonsense, every bit of it. Are the Oompa Loompas really joking, Grandpa? Asked Charlie. Well, of course they're joking, answered Grandpa Joe. They must be joking. At least I hope they're joking. Don't you? And that's the end of the chapter. That's where we're going to stop today. That's where we're going to pick up tomorrow, April 15th, which will be a Wednesday for us. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and set this book down, and we'll get to a couple shout-outs. So shout out number one, I wanted to shout out to my two friends who were here to play Monopoly with me. Thank you guys for being patient while I read a chapter of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I appreciate that. So shout out to Robert Plant, my good friend, confidant, especially during this time of quarantine. I can't tell you how many long nights me and Robert Plant have been up having a long late night conversation. So I really appreciate you stopping by. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. Thank you. Marvin, buddy, you know I love you. I appreciate you stopping by as always too. Even though you scared me with that little bite towards that fly, it seemed that startled me a little bit. And also, I would like to shout out to the Monopoly Man. I'm not sure I know what the Monopoly Man's name is. He kind of looks like the Colonel. But shout out to the Monopoly Man, Mr. Colonel, for coming up with a pretty cool Monopoly game. I appreciate that. So with that being said, that's going to conclude another episode of Hamilton Reads. Thanks for stopping by, and stay tuned for another episode tomorrow.